People who were born deaf but gained hearing later in life, what objects did you expect to make noise? My cousin was born deaf and went through an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids but can get by without them in general. His family had a bunny, Tupu. Of course he had learned about cows mooing, cats meowing etc. before he had his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny that it made no sound. It took the longest time for him to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals in general. He explained he thought all pets were loud. I had a child friend that gained hearing, and she didn't realize you could control the volume of your voice. So when I whispered to her she said, "Hang on, I think I need to adjust my hearing aid." At first I just thought, oh it mustn't be working, until I realized what was going on. She whispered to me for about 2 weeks solid just to practice. Yes, she also practiced shouting, but we did that in secluded woodlands. My old roommate in New York City got implants at, I think he was 25 or 26. He was shocked that the radiators in the house didn't make noise. He could feel them, and was absolutely sure, given their shaking and vibrating from time to time, that they were going to be quite noisy. On the flip side, he was deeply annoyed by the buzz of fluorescent lighting, which he did not expect to make noise. Well, after the cochlear implant, I started hearing a lot of things that I never knew existed. But here are a few things I thought would make a noise, but nope. Edit to clarify this. 1. I expected the light bulbs to hiss or flickering sound when you turn them on. I was so disappointed. 2. I thought you could hear your eyes close, blink, but there is no sound when you close your eyelids. No whoosh. 3. You know how wind makes a noise going through trees? I thought it would make more noises going through hair. Nope. 4. Now I could hear soft sounds, but I still get spooked when I see a bug crawling, and I don't hear it. They don't make a noise at all. 5. Pooping does not make a sound, only the splash into the toilet. I thought the body makes a noise to push it out. I was disappointed. Got waterproof hearing aids. Taking a shower scared the everlasting Christ out of me. Edit. I have a cochlear implant on one side, hearing aid on the other. I don't use waterproof unless I go swimming. One time, after swimming, I decided to keep them on when I was showering, and I got shivers down my spine. Obligatory not me, but my godfather dad's lifelong best friend. He was born with hearing, but lost it before age 2, due to some health issues. Went his entire childhood deaf, and in his 20s finally got a hearing aid. At the time, he and his wife were living in the downtown of a large city. Apparently he had it about 2 weeks before he threw it out, saying everything was too loud. He hated the noise and sound, that things were more peaceful without it. 15 years later, he moved out into the country on a few hundred acres of woods. Still, he refused to wear a hearing aid, and kept refusing for the next 10 years. Finally, his wife convinced him to give it a try, and his mind was blown. He couldn't believe how quiet everything was and how much he enjoyed hearing. He finally explained that he thought the noise of the traffic downtown was the wind, and that it sounded like that everywhere, all the time. So, for 25 plus years, he thought wind sounded like the hundreds of cars driving by. Seems like everyone is answering the reverse. My friend got his hearing at age 6. He swears to this day that he thought flowers would make some sort of noise and that's what attracted bees. Not me. My good friend who's hard of hearing told me about how before he got hearing aids, he thought that all fridges made a beeping sound, like an alarm, when you open them, so the house knows when you're getting something. Turns out his mom just told him that to stop him from eating all their snacks. My 3-year-old son is deaf, and we just had a visit this morning from his signing teacher who is also deaf herself. She recently had cochlear implants fitted, and while we were talking signing she said, "I'm sorry, I can't concentrate. I can hear a horrible constant noise. It's not stopped the whole time I've been here." Turned out it was the rain on my conservatory roof. Ironically, one of the most pleasant sounds there is. My girlfriend is not deaf, but she is hard of hearing, which for her means that she can't hear high frequency sounds. She recently got hearing aids that amplify the frequencies she can't hear, and was shocked to find out that birds and crickets chirp, to the point that she thought the birds were trying to attack her, and was horrified that we were surrounded by millions of bugs when I explained what the crickets were. Not me, but when I was in high school, a bunch of kids would meet in a nearby no man's land and hang out before school started. I spent most of my mornings loudly talking to my almost deaf friend. One day he showed up and said he had a new hearing aid. I didn't have to yell at him to get him to hear me anymore. Yay. Few minutes later he asked what that noise was. I asked which noise, listening and hearing nothing out of the ordinary. I don't know, it's like a weird beeping, almost musical, really bizarre but actually kind of pleasing. Took me a minute to realize my man was hearing birdsong for the first time in his life. Was a pretty cool moment. Edit. I now realize this is maybe the opposite of what was being asked. I was born with tons of fluid in my ears, and only had very slight hearing at best. When I was 6 months old, I had a surgery that put tubes in my ears to drain the fluid. My mom says when I came home from surgery, I went to my toy box and shook every toy in it to see what sounds they made. Honestly, it wasn't that serious, but did lead to some auditory processing issues, and I had to see a speech therapist until I was 7. Crazy what a difference 6 months of hearing makes that early on. Again obligatory not me, but my dad progressively went deafer as life went on, and was almost 100% deaf by around age 20. He got a cochlear implant when I was around 7 years old, put them in, asked my mom, "Are the kids always this damn loud?" and proceeded to take the cochlear implant off so he didn't have to listen to my little brother and I yelling. Always thought that was funny. My dad was born with severe hearing loss, but it wasn't detected until he was 50. His parents just thought he was ignorant if he didn't answer them. It's quite sad actually, his parents definitely failed him. He is also dyslexic, and it's affected every part of his life and self-worth, etc. Anyhow, my mum told him he needed a hearing test, because the TV was starting to deafen her. He thought, oh, it's just years of loud music and using a shotgun occasionally. So he has this hearing test, and some other tests etc., and gets told he was actually born deaf in one ear, and significant loss in another. He can't hear phonics. You can imagine his problems through life. He finally gets hearing aids, and the first day he sits down to eat a packet of crisps, he absolutely flips out. What the F is that noise? Holy shit, my head is exploding. We had to explain you can hear the crunching of food etc., and some foods are louder than others etc. It was heartbreaking to see what he's missed out on. Now he only uses his hearing aids after a good nag from my mum. We still have to put up with his noisy eating, but he's back to ignorance is bliss, lol. My wife always had terrible vision, but her mom and dad didn't take her seriously. By 2nd grade mom finally took her to an optometrist, and when she walked out with her first ever pair of glasses, yelled, "Oh my god. There are leaves on the trees. That's the green part. Oh my god. Grass are tiny individual leaves too." Until then she only saw trees and grass as a blob of green. Mom cried. So my dad was born deaf, and got a cochlear implant in his late 30s. He has since passed away, so I can't ask him this question directly, but a related story. When I was a newborn, my dad was holding me, and my mom, who is hearing, was in the kitchen. My dad rushed into the kitchen with me and asked what I was saying, because my mouth was moving, and my mom had to explain babies couldn't talk until they were much bigger. It's amazing how limited your perception can be if you aren't surrounded by people who can communicate with you. Unfortunately he didn't learn how to sign until he was a young adult as well, so his formative years were basically without language, see below. He and his mother created a very basic language to identify objects, some actions, but that's all. When he first heard sound, he didn't understand it, and it wasn't what he expected. In response to someone clapping and asking if his implant was working after waking from surgery, he said no, it wasn't working, it was, and that it felt like movement in his head. Edited for more information. He grew up in communist Eastern Europe, where any kind of sign language was outlawed. He and his mother created their own primitive and secret sign language, and he knew very little of his native European language. Children with disabilities were sent to live in boarding schools where they were taught trade skills. However, those with disabilities were heavily discriminated against under communism as adults, so he fled to another European country as a refugee, alone, without his family who helped him escape, at the age of 18, and lived in a refugee camp before coming to the USA through the help of a charity service. He learned ASL when he moved to the US through a volunteer service. The US provided him with opportunities he never would have had otherwise. My daughter suffered from recurring ear infections that went on for over a year before I could get the doctors to push 4 tubes in her ears. I felt that she was either unable to hear or that it was very muffled. The doctor that placed the tubes confirmed my suspicions in stating that she most likely heard noise as though she was underwater. I cannot attest to what exactly she expected to make noise, but I still tear up when I think about her face as she re-explored the entire house with renewed fascination. I can, however, give my subjective opinion based on her facial expressions. The thing that sticks out the most is the refrigerator. She was in awe over the humming noise that it makes, a noise that we often tune out because we are so accustomed to it. As she focused on that appliance for a bit, she made her way around to everything else that was large and stood in front of it, as if she was expecting everything to have its own secret noise. I can't say for sure, but the amount of time that she stayed with her face pressed up against the inactive washing machine and dryer leads me to believe with almost certainty that she was expecting those to hum and whirl as well. At her age, you wouldn't expect her to make a correlation between similarly sized appliances, but I'll be damned if it didn't appear that way. I can't remember what I expected to make noise, but first time I had hearing aids, I found out scratching my skin, brushing my hair and opening the door made noises. I got freaked out by birds as well. Kitchens are really noisy. I remember trying to figure out a bizarre sound to describe it, was bubbling water. Oh, and when people smile, it makes a noise. Edit, to add smile noise description. When people smile there is a noise I can only describe as a click, as the lips brush against the teeth. Took me 6 years to figure out what it was, whilst going from straight face to smiling in the mirror with hearing aids in. Open-mouthed smile only. My friends and colleagues love that I can hear them smiling without looking at them now. Oh, for once I actually have a relevant story for one of these. I was born with impaired hearing, but had an operation to fix it when I was very young. My dad loves to tell the story of me coming home for the first time with clear hearing. I get home, go to the bathroom to do my thing, and flush. Except I had never heard a toilet flush before. I bolt out of there in tears screaming for my parents, because I couldn't handle the shock that the toilet makes that much noise. One of my close friends in high school has a younger sister who used to be deaf before she got cochlear implants. We were watching a silent movie for a film class, and her younger sister thought that all movies made noise. She ran out thinking she was deaf again. Edit for clarity, we watched it at her home for an assignment. We were pretty quiet. Younger sister just panicked to see a movie playing and no noise, because her experience is that movies are real loud. Only realized that she could still hear after she heard the door close. Question: if you lose your hearing, can you still have tinnitus? That would be a nightmare to have ringing in your ear without any other sound to mitigate it. Quick Google search brought up, being hearing impaired doesn't exempt you from these kinds of sounds unfortunately. Deaf people are more likely to have tinnitus. In fact, it's thought to be linked to the damage that caused the deafness itself.